Hello, laboratory leaders. Thank you for tuning in to yet another video vignette from TheLabLeaderCoach.com. I'm Patty Eschliman, and I'm so glad that you were able to join me tonight because I get to discuss accountability. And in my video, Accountability, How to Lean In and Guide Others, I will provide you with some practical tools and great tips on how to ensure your success, especially around an issue perhaps you saw a huge disappointment and are now faced with the challenge of maybe feeling a little victimized and how to create a path to victory. I'm sure you, like I have occasionally in my career, have looked at someone and thought, what is wrong with them? Or maybe even, why don't they take accountability for their actions? Or perhaps you've made an accountability mistake, as I have, and then found that you could no longer be successful in that organization. We will take a deep dive into each one of these scenarios tonight, and I will help you identify how you can make a positive impact in each, mostly by taking accountability yourself, and then how to influence the accountability of others. So let's go ahead and get started. I will get rid of my big face here, and we'll start with our objectives tonight. So first, I will help you understand the difference between above the line behavior and below the line behavior. This concept comes from the book, The Oz Principle, written by Roger Connors, Tom Smith, and Craig Hickman in 2004. Second, I will describe the 4 steps necessary to turn away from victimization and how to create a path to victory. This is important from the book, important information from the book, Reality-Based Leadership, Ditch the Drama, Restore Sanity to the Workplace, and Turn Excuses into Results, written by Cy Wakeman in 2010. And third, you will learn the 5 most important things to be accountable for as defined in the book, No More Excuses, written by Sam Silverstein in 2012. Implementing these strategies is sure to improve your results in any endeavor and will create positive change in your relationships, both inside and outside of work. So what exactly is accountability and how has it changed? This is the old definition from the Webster's Dictionary. Accountability is subject to having to report, explain, or justify, being answerable, responsible. Now, think about that. For me, that sounds as if accountability is forced upon someone instead of what it means to take personal accountability. So I like the new definition. This comes from the Oz Principle book. Accountability is the attitude of continually asking, what else can I do to rise above my circumstances and achieve the results that I desire? A level of ownership that requires making, keeping, and proactive answering for commitments. Can you feel the difference? I sure can. And if so, that's a good thing, because changing accountability to an attitude adds a level of emotionality to it, something we can feel. This is important because part of this presentation is knowing when you are acting true to your values and in the accountability zone, and how it feels when you've stepped out of your accountability zone and are not respecting your core values. When you are in your accountability zone, you are engaged in acceptable actions or above the line behavior. And when you're violating your values, you will find yourself engaged in victim behavior and below the line behavior. This happens so easily, doesn't it? And sometimes those victim behaviors sneak in when we don't even know it. In fact, I'm going to bring my face back up here, hello, because I have a story to tell you about my accountability mistake that I mentioned earlier, that I think is a good one for us all to learn from. I know I learned a bunch from it. So let's go back a few years. I had worked for an organization where I was actually hired to design, implement, and staff a new laboratory that they once contracted out. And that was 15 years ago. So I found that, I was so excited. I found that experience to be so profoundly, professionally satisfying and incredibly, it was an incredible personal accomplishment. So as you can imagine, I was pretty excited to be able to repeat that when the organization announced that they were expanding into another city about 50 miles away. So, I was asked to create a business plan, which I did, modeling my current lab, and I presented that to administration. They got pretty excited about it and said, hey, how about a blood bank? What would it look if we had a blood bank? Oh, cool. I can add a blood bank. So I went back to the drawing board and I added a blood bank, and I came back for my second presentation, and everybody listened really well and said, we want to be a cutting edge laboratory. What would it look like if we had microbiology? Oh, that'd be so cool. So again, I went back to the drawing board. Excuse me. I added microbiology. Now you can imagine each time I added one of these services, the price tag went up. So by the time I had my third presentation, it had all the bells and whistles, and I was so excited about it. Well, to make a long story short, the administration decided to contract the laboratory. They felt that, my laboratory plans were too expensive, and they really believed that, they could have opportunity with this other laboratory. So, you can imagine, I was absolutely devastated. So what ended up happening is, you can look at this diagram here. I dropped way down to pretty much that second to the last rung, blaming others. I was very frustrated with their decision because I could see how long-term it would probably hinder the financial success of the organization. Sure, a laboratory can promise certain prices for tests, but how long will those prices last? And I also had concerns about quality patient care because when I started the previous lab, it would have been 13 and a half years earlier, I knew that my plans and the data proved it, within a year, that I made a positive impact on efficiency. I created value for the financial bottom line, saved them money, and made a big impact in quality patient care. So knowing that, I really felt like the decision was short-sighted. The result of that is they provided me the decision with the entire administration team there, and then asked me what I thought of the decision. And in my naivete, I would say, I told them that I had concerns about long-term financial and quality patient care. And that didn't go over so well. And so from that point forward, when I did identify some real concerns about quality patient care with the contracted laboratory, I pretty much was not taken seriously. And I was actually labeled as not a team player. And, that pretty much took me down. I dug a hole and I was beneath this ladder. And it took me a while to get through that. And I also then was charged with building the LIS for the third-party laboratory. And I knew how much work that was. I am a scientist and a laboratory leader. I am not an IT professional. It was agonizing work, and probably made it more difficult because I was sitting on that bottom rung of the ladder. Anyway, I will get to, let me just tell you now. Not only was I labeled as not a team player, it was about time for my performance review. And so my boss came in, we sat down, and it was the worst performance review I've ever had in 30 years. It was scathing. I was so surprised. It was like a 2x4 hitting the side of my head. And one would think that, I would just dig a hole and stay there, clear, miles below the ladder. But instead, the shock propelled me straight up that ladder. And I really took some thought into, what I had done to create that mistrust. And I say mistrust because my supervisor at the time didn't have any data. He had some things that he had concerns for that I had no understanding of. I kind of believe that they were false. No, they were false. And I have to tell you, now that I'm sharing some vulnerabilities with you, that all I could do was cry. And it's never a good situation when you can't even articulate, or come back with better responses than just grabbing the Kleenex box. So I did ask if there would be an opportunity that we could meet, in a few days where I could gather my thoughts. It was interesting because my current boss had actually been provided a administrative position for the new hospital. So he was actually training his replacement, which would be my new boss. And the poor guy, this was his second day. So it was pretty challenging. Interesting enough, though, I have some comments around that second behavior that I'll share until later in the presentation, but everything did work out well. I will say that I did take accountability for my actions, and I made positive changes. And then when I did have more data on those patient quality issues and created some changes to help with those issues, I was not supported. The mistrust was too big. And so I knew at that time I was facing my reality that I truly was being judged by my behavior over the last 6 months. And those 14 and a half years that I had previously been very engaged and very successful for that organization, I knew that I could no longer be successful there. So I will have to say, though, when I made the change to find another opportunity, I moved back home closer to my family. And it has been the most positive experience I could imagine. Having that support system, having that fun, being close to my lake house, and just really enjoying my new organization, which is a pretty large healthcare system. And I have an amazing boss, and she and I communicate very well together. So the reason why I share this story is because we're going to be coming back to it several times in this presentation. There's a lot to be learned from it, and I will certainly elaborate that as we go along. The things I learned is that, we all visit Pity City from now and then, but, as I was going down this, really troubled down the ladder and under that below the line behavior, I actually probably had a rental property in Pity City and was very close to, buying a house and setting up residency. And so that's the problem. And we'll be touching upon that. Now, I am sharing my mistake because I believe as long as we're learning from our mistakes, it's not a negative experience. There are events that happen in our lives, good and bad, but as long as we're learning from it, we will continue to be on that road to success. And I know that as we address my mistake, you and I will both revisit the things that can be learned in that experience. So let's go ahead and continue on with the presentation. And thanks for listening to my story. So we'll move on to the next slide here. So how was I able to take that leap of faith, and what tools can I provide so you can do the same? You really do not have to quit your job to turn your victim story into one of victory. As in my experience, I had to take a long look into what was the actual reality and how could I separate the facts from the story I was telling myself in my head. Here were my stories. First, those blankety blanks, they set me up for failure by making me go back to the drawing board twice just to get the price tag too high for them to consider. Hearing a little bit of blame in that? Yep, that's below the line. Second, I failed my team. I'm a miserable leader if I'm unable to articulate the value of having an inside service laboratory. You can see I was definitely the victim. I am so worthless. Woe is me. And finally, no lab but my lab can provide the quality of service our patients deserve. Yeah, switch that inward pain into outward, downright anger. Creating blame was the below the line behavior, while feeling worthless and anger were feelings generated from the stories I was telling myself instead of concentrating on these three facts. 1, hospital administration made the decision to outsource the lab. Those words are pretty unemotional. It was a fact. Second, they are the decision makers. Absolutely. That's what they do every day. And 3, I did my best because I always do. I had lost faith in my core values of excellence. The feelings I felt then created my actions. I quickly turned away from being a person who saw positivity and enthusiasm for everything into someone who viewed this situation in a negative light. I then made the fatal error of expressing my concerns, even though I distinctly remember them asking for my input regarding the decision. They were only looking for my commitment to the decision and were not interested in hearing my concerns. If I'd used my emotional intelligence, I could have realized this and kept my concerns for private discussion with my boss instead of creating public frustration with the CEO, CFO, CMO, and CNO, and about 25 other people in the room. Once I made the turnaround and accepted the reality and my contribution to it, I knew that I had to find a solution to the situation. Remember, I asked my boss and his soon-to-be replacement for a second meeting. In this second meeting, I was more prepared and less emotional. I'd taken ownership of my behavior that was below the line and apologized for the part that I had played. I also reinforced all the positive things that I had accomplished to make the transition a positive one and reinforced my commitment to ensuring the contracted lab success. I also had data to prove inconsistencies with the previous allegations of poor performance. Remember, he had no data. And I provided data in support of my concerns for quality patient care, such as amended reports, failed turnaround times, and missed patient lab tests. I asked for clarification on the allegations that I felt were not true, but still did not receive any clear answers. While I did not get the rating on my performance evaluation to change, I walked away from the second meeting with dignity and full of pride that I was not the person my boss thought I was. In fact, the gentleman he was training as his replacement asked to speak with me the next day and told me he was sorry about the situation and promised me that things would be different with him. He admired my courage and the positive contribution I had made in making the contracted lab service a success. The lesson in my example is, it's okay to visit Pity City from time to time, but just don't take up residence. Acknowledge your reality sooner, own it faster, and hold that accountability conversation as soon as possible. The longer you wait to hold that conversation, the more difficult it is to get your credibility back. My behavior created an opportunity for mistrust. Once trust is lost, it can be very difficult to rebuild. Once you have that conversation, it can be very easy to jump in and start creating value right away. Let go of those damaging stories. There's a great quote from C.S. Lewis that says, "Getting over a painful experience is much like crossing monkey bars. You have to let go at some point in order to move forward. Let go and keep the lines of communication open. Over-communication will help build the trust back much faster." In my case, I had already decided to move back home, even though my new boss asked me to stay. He said he thought we could work well together, and I really believed we could, but I had already made my decision. This is also a great way to look at accountability. Stephen Covey wrote in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that there are 3 paradigms to maturity. First, there is the paradigm of you. This is a very immature and dependent thought pattern where one takes no accountability for what is happening around them. Instead, someone else is meant to take care of you, and when things don't work out, it is this other person who is to blame. Next is the paradigm of I. This is a mature and independent way of thought where one takes accountability for what they do and when they do it, and understands that they have choice. Once choice is understood, one can differentiate between above the line behavior and below the line behavior and accept the consequences of both. Finally is the paradigm of we. This is also a mature thought pattern and is what makes business and relationships successful. It is the understanding the value of interdependence, knowing that together talents and abilities can combine to create something bigger and better than its individual contributions. Accountability really does have choice at the root of the equation. Once you have the mindset that results, good or bad, happen because of your actions, you can accept that your choices matter. You can't always choose what happens to you, but you can certainly choose how you want to react and behave in those circumstances. Take, for example, a project that you fell behind in and your boss wants to know why it wasn't completed on time. Here are two ways to approach your answer. First, I'm sorry, I just didn't have enough time. What does that sound like? There's some blame. Blame that the universe only has 24 hours a day. How effective can you get in that argument? Or, I'm sorry, I didn't manage my time well. Take accountability for you that you had choice and found it challenging to make the right choice. They both tell your boss that you ran out of time, but the second response takes accountability for the part you played. You certainly know how to prioritize the things that are important. Perhaps you didn't realize just how important this project was to your boss, but then again, if you're truly accountable, you would have kept her updated throughout the process so there would be no surprises at the end. I can promise you that if you take accountability for a mistake, it creates a level of respect and builds trust. Just don't make too many mistakes. I also agree with Sam Silverstein. Here he elaborates on making choices. Our first accountability is to the person we see in the bathroom mirror each morning. In other words, when you have taken the time to figure out your core values, those non-negotiable things that you believe in with your heart and soul, then it is easy to make good choices about what you want to do. If it was one of your core values to be true to your word and you had promised your boss that you would get the project completed on time, there would be no doubt that you would prioritize the project and move heaven and earth to manage your time so that it would get done within the appropriate time frame. Also, if this project required input from others, you would resolve to hold others accountable to your core value to ensure you got what you needed from them to get the project completed on time. And speaking of holding others accountable, how does accountability relate to personal engagement? Well, you can't have one without the other. Accountability drives positive results and personal engagement. Therefore, as a leader, you should listen more to your staff who hold themselves accountable and pay less attention to the staff who are least accountable. Why? Your less accountable staff have made the choice not to be accountable, and they need to live the consequences. It is all too common to spend most of our time with the negative Nancys and less time with the successful Sams. Turn this around. Reward appropriate behavior with your time. Of course, you can invite your less accountable members to step up to accountability by clarifying your expectations and showing them the reality of their situation. But it is ultimately up to them to own it and look for solutions. Don't disengage your most accountable staff members by paying less attention to them. And on a side note, don't wait until an official performance evaluation to hold this discussion. There should never be any surprises in an evaluation. Having an accountability discussion should happen long before it turns into a performance issue. Instruct your entire team that your expectations for personal accountability include 4 elements. First, a commitment to do what it takes to get positive results. They need to think both independently and interdependently to meet the department goals. Second, they must remain resilient in their ability to accomplish their goals despite obstacles obstacles and setbacks, because setbacks will happen. Third, they must take ownership of their goals and understand that they have a choice in their actions and there are consequences related to those choices. And fourth, approach every project as a learning experience. Knowing that both success and failure is a learning experience will help fuel future success. Here's some great thoughts to remember when you're committed to being accountable to a project or a situation. Are your actions in full alignment with what you have agreed to accomplish with others? Do you fully understand your contribution to the outcome? Do you openly seek feedback and invite discussion during the project to ensure a positive outcome? And do you remain transparent so that everyone knows where you're at in the process and understands why you've made the decisions you have made and where you stand on the issues? If you're in the accountability zone, you know that you are making choices based in your core values, and you are committed to success in these 5 areas. 1, you know what is right and can make decisions on what is the right thing to do instead of what is easy, popular, or more expedient. 2, remain open to new ideas and new opportunities. Don't get so engaged in a project that you get tunnel vision and fail to see success from different avenues. Stay open-minded to looking at things differently and inviting feedback from others to find new opportunities. Remember my example earlier, while I was disappointed in the contracted lab example, it did not help to get angry about my lab being the best and only option for quality patient care. Having the lab contracted also provided more treatment opportunities for our patients, which was a good thing. 3, understand that it is not what happens to you when you experience a setback or an obstacle, because you will. They just happen. Just know that it is up to you and your choice on how you react and behave. For example, I have learned never to take the last flight out of O'Hare Airport in Chicago. Over several experiences when flights have been canceled at the last minute, instead of queuing up in the long line to scream at the attendant when he or she had nothing to do with the airline's decision, I calmly remain in my seat and use my cell phone to change my flight or get a rental car if I need to get me to my final destination. Now, I just avoid the situation altogether. That is managing the solution. 4, make sure you're setting the right expectations, staying true to your values, and clearly communicating your expectations to others. Ambiguity only breeds confusion and demotivates others to do the right thing. While I knew better than to express my frustration to the team when the decision was made to outsource the new lab, they could feel my frustration and observe my decline in positivity. Then, when I tried to get them to rally behind the decision, they really did not know what to do. Instead, if I had briefly shared my disappointment, but pointed out my dedication to the organization and a respect for their decision, I could have better engaged them in my commitment to positive outcomes. 5, understand and take accountability for the part you play in all of your relationships. Don't delay as I did if there is a mistrust building in a relationship. Hold that conversation you've been putting off for whatever reason. Ask for feedback on how you can improve the relationship, or hold a crucial conversation and ask for a commitment from someone else who is not meeting your needs. Clearly describe your expectations and the gap in behavior. When you're in the accountability zone, it is easy to make commitments, be accountable for the progress, keep the commitment, and own the results. If the result is not one you're happy with, make a commitment that you believe it will create a more positive outcome and start the commitment cycle all over again. All right. Thank you for tuning in today. I really enjoyed sitting down with you and discussing accountability. Come back and visit my videos. You can see me on my website, www.TheLabLeaderCoach.com, or you can reach out to me personally by email at patty@TheLabLeaderCoach.com. Also visit my Facebook page at Patty Eshelman, The Lab Leader Coach. Sensing a pattern here. However you reach me, if you like my Facebook page or provide me with your email address, you will be one of the first to receive all of the great free videos and tips and checkoff lists of leadership material of proven strategies that I am confident will help you on your journey to being a successful leader. Thank you again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.